Hi, I'm Anna Wells, Executive Editor of Industrial Distribution, and today we're here to talk about metrics that matter. For many distributors, the pandemic was a wake-up call. For those who had digital strategies already in place, were they adequate, understood, and being used to their fullest capabilities? Based on a relentless array of business challenges, the impetus had become clear. In order to remain competitive in this complex and constantly evolving market, companies needed to get a better handle on their key metrics that drive their businesses and be able to evaluate and modify them as business conditions change. So the case has not become if to pursue data-driven solutions, but which data and how to make it actionable. And it might not be the same points you used to evaluate your business operations in years past, which is what we're here to talk about today. Our friends over at White Cup have developed a white paper detailing how distributors can tap into and evaluate the most meaningful metrics for their businesses. Joining me today is ID editor Andy Zoll, and we're going to discuss the high points of White Cup's report as well as some key takeaways. So as White Cup points out in this paper, some of the historical key performance metrics that distributors looked to in the past are no longer relevant, and some are actually much more important than they ever were. So we're going to walk through the 5 key metrics that they've identified as ones that matter now. And I want to start with profit margin. This one is obviously critical when you consider the rising costs of goods and services for sellers at this time and how that can impact bottom line profitability. In fact, this report contends that high inflation over the last few years means that cost of goods prices are 50% higher, and customers at this point even expect higher prices and are indifferent to a certain level of increase. Andy, it sounds like distributors can improve their insight into this shifting landscape. What should they be looking at here?
So first and foremost, distributors need to be sure in this era of inflation that their pricing and profitability is adjusted to the proper level and make sure they're changing how they price their inventory at the customer level. The report suggests that customers, as you mentioned, are already anticipating price increases in the current climate, creating what White Cup calls a zone of indifference that allows distributors some wiggle room to reset their pricing to realize better profit margins. But it's vital to use data to set those prices. Although the right price points will protect margins, the report notes that the wrong price at the wrong time means lost business, profit, or both.
Right, absolutely. Secondly, let's talk about inventory management, which you can't do these days without touching on the issue of shortages. Andy, tell us why visibility into product line pricing and profitability performance from an inventory perspective is paramount.
So that information allows distributors to decide how and where to make strategic investments with the finite amount of dollars set aside for inventory. The report particularly highlights gross margin return on investment, or GMROI, which helps determine the overall financial return on distributor stock by examining the cost of goods sold and average inventory cost. If GMROI is less than 50 points on a particular product, it doesn't make sense to push that product with your sales team. It could, however, lead to conversations with warehouse vendors about how to create value from that dead inventory. The report also says monitoring inventory also goes hand in hand with pricing. Keeping eyes on both has never been more important in this era of shortages. And protecting inventory for your best customers can go a long way toward keeping those customers for life.
Definitely. And I think we saw a lot of that in the pandemic, smart businesses making that decision to hold on to some of that. Sales performance is another key area that White Cup stresses distributors understand with some transparency. I thought the paper brought out a few solid points about how businesses could use data to not just access a better understanding of the success or failure of their efforts, but also to be better salespeople.
So getting the right measurements and analysis of any operation in a business creates an avenue for improving it, and sales is no different. Analytics on the individual sales rep level can help guide conversations about performance and growth and provide just more command and control of sales as a whole. That's something that's particularly important in the remote work environment that emerged and accelerated during the pandemic and is still around today. The report also highlighted the importance of understanding sales performance on digital channels. Tracking your percentage of e-commerce sales is one way to understand how successful your business is at guiding customers through that digital marketplace. And just from kind of a 10,000-foot level, the right information can also demonstrate value to a customer that they won't be able to get anywhere else. It's important to realize that customers want their B2B experiences to match their expectations for their B2C transactions.
Yes, and you can thank Amazon for that.
For sure.
The next point I want to cover is the role of data in expense management. I found this section of the report to be particularly interesting because the authors identify this as an area in need, but one where the data subjects of critical importance have actually really shifted. For example, they say that in the past, things such as time to back order were key metrics to focus on, but in today's market, they call that, quote, devastatingly irrelevant. Andy, what should distributors be watching instead when it comes to expense management?
So the report says it's important to track expenses early and often because they have a tendency to add up quickly, but also specifically because monitoring the costs needed to achieve top-line growth can help avoid unpleasant surprises on your profit reports. There's a couple of different ways they point out to look at it. On one hand, to make up for an extra $1,000 in costs, you need to either sell an additional $25,000 or, in effect, double sales at a typical gross profit margin of 4%. The analysis also really emphasized the importance of good expense management in the current environment. The kind of disruption in supply chains we're seeing now means distributors need to do everything else well in order to, as they put it, fight for every nickel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting and impactful data when you look at how what feels like a small number can actually be such a big amount, when it comes to bottom line. The last area we're going to talk about today is metrics around customer management. Now, White Cup believes that the issues that once dominated here, such as tracking returns, are of much lesser importance today as distributors have kind of bigger fish to fry. Andy, what should distributors be looking at instead?
So there's two things. One is accounts receivable, but White Cup notes it's important to also keep an eye on collections and any outliers because very few ERP systems keep historical track of that metric. And the other is identifying which customers have increased their purchase volumes due to supply chain issues with their current distributor. For the latter, just to bring us back to the first point we talked about here, it's critical to make sure you're pricing them appropriately. Otherwise, you run the risk they'll go elsewhere as soon as those supply issues are resolved.
For sure. Yep. All right, that's about all the time that we have for today. We'd encourage you to click the link below to access this white paper and get the full version from White Cup. They have some great insights into how to get a better handle on these key metrics. Thanks very much to our own Andy Zoll. I'm Anna Wells of Industrial Distribution, and thank you for joining us.